Today we actually talk about how my midwife practice came to be and how I developed the program that many people are asking about as far as nutrition, exercise, and supplements during pregnancy. You don't need to be afraid. You can handle this, and here's how you do it.
The Ask Dr. Mom Show.
Welcome to the Ask Dr. Mom Show. In this episode, we are going to start a 3-part series on pregnancy because I have had a lot of questions come in asking me what I did back when I had my midwife practice about different things, whether it's nutrition or exercise, supplementation. And so because we've had so many questions come in on this, and because we recently did a 3-part series on infertility, I think now we need to move into the happy phase
of pregnancy.
That's right, where they have taken all the steps to achieve a pregnancy now. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So today we're going to start part 1 of that 3-part series. So before we get into this, let me kind of share how that midwife practice came about to begin with.
Okay.
And then that will kind of explain how all of these different things evolved. Mm-hmm. For years after I had my first child, now when I had my first baby at 20, I knew nothing about the stuff that we're going to discuss now. But I was born in the 50s, you know, raised through the 50s and 60s, so I was enough of a hippie that I was going to have this child naturally.
Okay.
Even though that wasn't maybe the norm.
And then so it was in the 70s you were having your own kids, started.
74. I was 20 years old having my first baby. And I was going to do this naturally.
Okay.
Of course, in my young mind, I had no idea that midwives still existed, that this could actually be done completely, naturally, at home. But within the parameters of my conventional box, I was going to do this naturally. So I took all the Lamaze classes. I took the Bradley method. I took the classes, I studied, because I'm going to do this naturally. And one of the most naive things I ever did was walk up to my mother, who had had 6 children, and say, you know, Mom, giving birth doesn't have to be painful. It's just pressure.
Yeah.
You can see how indoctrinated I was getting.
Yeah.
And if you just learn to work with the body,
to breathe through
and
it,
to breathe,
to meditate.
That's right. It's just pressure.
I have friends who talk about their experiences that way.
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome?
I think it would. I think it would. I've never experienced it.
I never have either. But I remember my wise mother just kind of smiling and nodding.
Right.
That's good, dear. I hope that works for you.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, I give birth the first time, and through the first couple of centimeters, you know, I'm breathing and everything's fine. And it was true. It was pressure.
Right.
Until I hit about 4 centimeters.
Right.
You know, and that first really active contraction kicked in. And all of a sudden I realized somebody had lied to me.
Your whole body tenses up, which
That's
makes
right.
it even harder.
Because there is
transition.
definitely some pain going on here.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, but I did have him natural. I did give birth unmedicated. We're going to sort this little dilemma out later, but
It's all natural.
that's right. I did give birth unmedicated. So after that, I got really active in doing what people would call a doula now. If I had friends or acquaintances or people who wanted to go natural, a lot of times I would go with them, just help them with breathing and relaxing and all of those kinds of things. And then through the years, a few doctors got to know me really well. And so if they had a patient or a client who wanted to give birth naturally, they would actually call me up and say, hey, would you mind coming in for this birth and just kind of helping out?
There, yeah.
Right. And so I would do that. And so
And so you weren't doing anything with herbs or oils or anything
oh
like that?
no, this was all just breathing, relaxation,
And basically support.
some pressure points maybe,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, basically just a support. So I had been doing that, and after maybe 10 years of this, we had moved to Arkansas, and a friend of mine said, she was going to have her third or fourth, I think. A friend of mine said, hey, would you deliver this baby at home for me? And at that point in my journey, I thought, you are out of your ever-loving mind.
Yeah, you don't do that.
No, you don't have babies at home. What's wrong with you? We have all of this help out here.
Yeah.
And so I told her no. I certainly wasn't qualified to deliver a baby.
Right.
But I would do what I'd done with everyone else. And you call me when you're in labor, and I'll go with you and
Right.
be your doula, coach. So she calls me up one Saturday morning, and I was in the middle of canning tomatoes at the time. And she called me up, said she was in labor, and I said, okay. And I actually loaded up my tomatoes, canning stuff, because, you know, labor takes a while. I thought I might as well have the canner going while we're breathing. So I load all this stuff up, take it to her house, and I get out of the car, walk in to see how she's doing, kind of assess the situation. And she's sitting at her kitchen table, bent over it.
Oh, she's in transition.
You know, and I could tell the minute I heard her breathing
Yeah.
that she had waited too long. And I said, okay, soon as this one's over, we're going to the hospital. And she looked at me and said, can I go to the bathroom first?
Oh.
And I said, sure, go to the bathroom and then we'll load up and go to the hospital.
Oh.
Well, she'd been in the bathroom probably a good 5 minutes. And I went to the door and I said, are you okay? How are you doing?
Yeah.
And she said, you know, my water just broke and it feels really good to push. That was my first home delivery. And we literally did it with the pot of boiling water to sterilize some scissors and a shoelace. So that was my first delivery. So the years pass after that, and years later, probably, I don't even know. It had probably been 20 years since I had had my first one. And my daughter-in-law wanted me to deliver her baby at home.
And at this point, are you a master herbalist and those
Yes.
things? Okay.
Yes. So actually this might have even been longer than 20 years. But now I'm in a place where I am a master herbalist and my world and view has really broadened. And I was all for home birth, but I was not a certified licensed midwife. And so when she asked me to deliver that baby, again I said, you know, I'm not qualified to do this, but I'll be happy to be with you if you want to get someone else. Well, she worked on me for several months, and she said, Mom, you've been doing this for over 20 years. You've been involved in all these births, and I really feel strongly about this. I want you to do this. We're within 5 minutes of the hospital.
Right. So there was an emergency.
Yeah, if
That's a
anything goes
consideration.
wrong, we can get there. And so I finally met another midwife, told her about my dilemma. She laughed at me and said, oh my gosh, you're more qualified than most of the midwives out there practicing, or a lot of them anyway.
Yeah.
Just because of all the experience I had been having for 20 years. And so she said, look, here's the things you need to check. And so she literally walked me through the basics of checking urine and what to watch for, to check blood every month and what you're watching for, and how to measure. I mean, she walked me through the basics. And at one point, I remember getting a little panicky and saying, but oh my gosh, what if there's too much of this or that in the urine? Or what if the blood looks like this? And she literally looked at me and said, Sandy, stop and think logically.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at it logically and think, what would you do if this was you personally? For instance, if the protein in the urine is a little too high,
Right.
then what's going on? They really should cut back on how much
Protein.
they're eating.
Yeah.
You know, the red meat, all the...
Yeah.
And so it was simple things like that. She just kind of walked me through and she said, don't make this a big, complicated mess. Birth is a very natural part of life. And if you just watch for the imbalances,
Right.
you already know how to correct them. And so it was amazing how she helped me transition from the world I was used to being around with all of the technology and the emergencies and the panic and the
Right.
all the stuff to something that was really very natural and normal. And so anyway,
And I think that removes the fear when we have that perspective shift.
oh, it's amazing how much fear it takes away. Because all of a sudden, things that you thought were so critical are really quite easy to fix. If you just stay calm and logical about it. So anyway, we ended up having a beautiful delivery. I brought my grandson into the world. It was an incredible experience. And so in those early years, I told my children, look, this is just for you.
No one else.
No one else. We're keeping this in the family for a reason. And to make a really long story short, you know, there would always be an exception.
Yes. Dear
They-
friend.
A dear friend who didn't have insurance, they were young college kids, you know, whatever the thing was. And so it just exponentially grew from there. But in those early years, I was still studying and learning. I had gotten my Master Herbalist, but then I was studying microscopy. And, you know, then I did start taking classes from the School of Midwifery. And so there were and I went to massage therapy school for a while. So there was all of these different modalities that I was learning about. And so when I was studying microscopy, they really taught us, which is the study of live blood.
Right.
They really took us into the world of alkalinity versus acidity and how it changes the structure of your red blood cells. It was absolutely fascinating to watch how our cells will change according to the environment that we give them. And so one Sunday afternoon when everybody was together for Sunday dinner, I was kind of reflecting on this and I said, I wonder, because I had so many women at that time and I was doing these monthly checkups, and so I'm checking everybody's urine every month, and everybody typically was acidic.
Right.
And so that particular day, I
So
was
you thought we need to change something.
right. I was just kind of pondering out loud, and I said, I wonder if the diet were changed, if we brought in the right supplements, if
you
the
could make it
urine,
alkaline, an
Right.
alkaline environment.
yeah, would the urine change? Well, my oldest son's wife's mother, so my oldest son's mother-in-law, was a nurse, worked at the hospital. And so they went home and told her what I'd been saying, and she said, absolutely not.
Oh my goodness.
You can't change the acidity. Urine is acidic. That's the point of urine. You're getting rid of toxins and acidity.
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
Interesting.
Well, the next Sunday, they came back and told me that. And so in my uneducated mind, you know. My husband used to tease me that I was like a bumblebee because he's a pilot. He told me that, you know, a bumblebee aerodynamically cannot fly. It's impossible.
And yet they fly.
But they don't know that.
Yeah.
So they fly anyway. And he said, you know, in some ways you're the same way.
You don't know what's impossible.
That's right. Because I never went to medical school, because I never had all of that book learning, I didn't know that these things were impossible. And so when they came back and told me it was impossible, and you know me well enough to know that there's a little bit of a
challenge accepted.
That's right. Don't tell me it can't be done. So I thought, wow, she works in a hospital with sick and dying people. If they're acidic, if their urine is acidic, I'll bet a healthy person shouldn't be.
Right, right.
And so because of that, that's where I began to develop the program that people quite often question me about. Because after that challenge, I started creating a diet program for my ladies, an exercise program, and a supplement program. And I started becoming very strict about it.
Yeah.
But the exciting, fascinating thing that I discovered was when they followed it, through testing their blood, through testing their urine, and then the outcome, the labor and deliveries and births we had, radically changed. And you can change the pH of urine because when they would follow the program, I found out after that that typically their urine would be in the neutral area. As opposed to being way over here on the acidic side. And so as we move in to these next 2 episodes, we are going to go into detail on the program that I developed through those years with all of these ladies who ended up coming to me to deliver their babies. And so I hope that kind of laying this foundation, telling my story of how this all began, it will make sense kind of how the program evolved. And we will go into detail on that in our next 2 episodes. Thank you for joining us today. This has been the Ask Dr. Mom Show. I'm Sandra Ellis with Alicia Decker. You can find more episodes on Facebook by going to Sprigs Life or Dr. Mom's Healthy Living. Online, you can find us at sprigs.life or drmomsnutraceuticals.life.